I grew up thinking I was the luckiest girl alive. While other kids dreamed about living in fairy tale mansions, I actually lived in one. Our house was enormous, with white pillars that shone in the sun, marble floors that echoed under my shoes, and chandeliers that sparkled like fallen stars. My closet always overflowed with clothes, many of them designer labels I didn't even know how to pronounce at the time. On the outside, it looked like the kind of life people would envy, and honestly, I believed it too. I thought being surrounded by all that luxury meant I was loved, special, and chosen. My mother played her role perfectly in front of others. Doting, elegant, firm, but refined. She expected me to sit straight, speak properly, never make a scene. Behind closed doors, though, I felt her love was more like a performance than something real. She would buy me beautiful dresses but rarely hug me. She'd smile at me during family gatherings but scold me for tiny mistakes when no one was looking. My father, on the other hand, barely bothered with pretense. To outsiders, he was respected and admired, this successful, commanding figure. To me, he was cold, distant, and emotionally unreachable, like a statue that lived in our house more than a parent. The strange part was that the person who gave me the most comfort wasn't either of them. It was Rosa, our maid. She was supposed to stay in the background, but she didn't. Her eyes softened whenever she looked at me, her hugs lingered, and she always seemed to know when I needed comfort before I even opened my mouth. Sometimes, I caught her staring with something almost like heartbreak in her expression. I didn't know it then, but her warmth was the first clue that my perfect life was an illusion waiting to collapse. It didn't happen all at once. At first, the cracks in my perfect life were so small I barely noticed them. But once you start paying attention, you can't unsee them. I remember sitting at the dining table one evening, polished silverware reflecting the chandelier light, when my mother made a comment that felt like a slap disguised as a joke. One of our family friends had said I looked nothing like her, and my mother laughed and said, "Well, maybe she's just the odd one out in the family." Everyone chuckled politely, but her eyes lingered on me with a sharpness that made me shrink inside. I brushed it off, but it stung more than I wanted to admit. Then there was Rosa. She was supposed to stay in her place, keeping her head down like all the staff did. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't just loyalty or duty. It was something deeper, something she tried to hide but couldn't. She would tuck a strand of hair behind my ear tenderly, or whisper reassurances when I cried after one of my mother's rants. Once, when I scraped my knee running in the garden, Rosa hugged me so tightly it almost felt desperate. "You'll be okay, my girl," she whispered, her voice breaking in a way that didn't match the situation. Back then, I tried to tell myself she was just too soft-hearted, but it always felt strangely personal. And then there were the arguments, muffled behind closed doors. My parents thought I couldn't hear, but I did. Late at night, their voices carried through the hallways. My mother's sharp tone, my father's low growl. I never caught it all, but I caught enough. Phrases like, "She deserves the truth," or worse, "It's too late now." My stomach twisted whenever I heard those words because I had no idea what truth they were talking about. Sometimes I wanted to barge in and demand answers, but fear kept me paralyzed. The life that looked like a dream to outsiders was beginning to rot from the inside for me. Every smile from my mother felt thinner, every cold silence from my foes. They're heavier, and every lingering look from Rosa more confusing. There was something none of them were telling me, and the not knowing was slowly eating me alive. At school, the whispers always seemed louder than the teachers' voices. No matter how hard I tried to focus on the board, I could feel eyes on me, followed by the sharp sting of stifled laughter. I didn't understand why at first, but then I overheard one of the girls say it outright. "She doesn't even look like her parents. Did you see her mom? Blonde hair, pale skin, sharp nose. And her? Darker eyes, darker skin, way different features." Another girl giggled and added, "Yeah, she looks more like the maid." The maid. Those two words pierced me more deeply than any bully had before. I laughed it off in the moment, tried to act like I didn't care, like their words were ridiculous. But deep down, I wondered if they saw something I didn't. Every time I compared myself to the framed family portraits lining our mansion hallway, I noticed how my mother's golden curls and my father's storm gray eyes didn't exist in me. Standing between them, I always looked like someone had pasted me into the picture. The comments only grew crueler over time. Boys smirked and asked if I was adopted. Girls whispered that maybe my mother was too ashamed to admit the truth. Once, during lunch, someone actually asked if I was Rosa's kid. They laughed like it was just a cruel joke, but it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream at them, defend myself, but the problem was, I couldn't completely deny it. When I finally gathered the courage to go to my mother about it, hoping she'd comfort me, the reaction I got was nothing like what I needed. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, not even looking up from her magazine. "Stop embarrassing yourself by repeating gossip from children who are beneath you." Her tone was so sharp, so dismissive, that I felt like the floor dropped beneath me. She didn't hug me. She didn't reassure me. She practically called me stupid for even asking. That's when Rosa found me crying in my room. She knocked gently, waited, then came in with this look on her face I'll never forget. She sat beside me and pulled me into her arms, stroking my hair like she was trying to smooth away something heavier than tears. "Don't listen to them, my love," she whispered. whispered. Her voice trembled, but there was this fierce protection in it. She never directly denied what the bullies said, but she tried to build me back up. You are stronger than their poison. Remember that. I leaned into her warmth, confused, angry, desperate for answers, but also terrified of what those answers could mean. The push and pull tore at me. One side, the woman who raised me as mother, was cold and cutting, shutting down my fears like they were nothing more than dust under her expensive rug. The other side, Rosa, supposedly just a maid, offered me the love and compassion that filled all the holes my mother left empty. And the more this contrast played out, the harder it became to silence the questions in my head. I began watching people when they weren't looking. Rosa's smile at me, that tender softness, my mother's occasional glare filled with annoyance rather than affection, my father's indifference, as if my existence didn't touch him at all. And underneath it all, the laughter of my classmates kept echoing. Maybe they knew something I didn't. Maybe everyone knew, except me. That was the moment I started to feel like I didn't fully belong in my own life, like I was living inside someone else's story, waiting, dreading, for the page where the real truth would be written in ink I couldn't erase. One night, everything changed. I was walking past my parents' study when I heard their voices, louder and sharper than usual. My mother's words cut through the thick wooden door. "We can't keep hiding this forever. One day she'll find out," my father hissed back. "Ugh, it's too late now. She's ours. End of discussion." My heart pounded so violently in my chest I thought they'd hear it through the door. I pressed my ear closer, trembling, desperate for more. But then silence. Nothing but the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. That silence only made me burn worse. My legs moved on their own, carrying me to the study later that night while everyone was asleep. My hand shook as I turned the doorknob. Inside, the room smelled of cigars and old leather. Shelves of books towered around me, and the large oak desk loomed in the center like a beast guarding secrets. I fumbled through drawers, half praying I'd find nothing, half praying for the truth. What I found knocked the air out of me. First, a faded envelope filled with documents, my birth records. The hospital listed my mother's name, but it wasn't the one I'd grown up calling Mom. Rosa's name was written there instead. My eyes blurred as I read it again, over and over, hoping my tired mind had twisted the letters. But no, it was her. Then came old photographs tucked so carelessly away, yet heavy enough to break my world apart. One showed Rosa in a hospital gown, cradling a newborn. Me. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but they shone with a kind of love I had never seen in my so-called mother's gaze. Finally, there was a small hospital bracelet, tiny enough to fit an infant's wrist, with my name carved into it beside Rosa's. I nearly dropped everything as my knees buckled. My whole life suddenly felt like a stolen script, rewritten by deceit. Grabbing the documents with shaky hands, I ran straight to Rosa's room in the servants' quarters. She sat up in bed, startled, when she saw me holding the papers. "Tell me this isn't true," I begged, my voice breaking. "Please, tell me." Her face crumpled instantly, and before I could speak again, she broke down sobbing. "Mi hija, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her accent thick with grief. She reached for me, but I pulled back. I needed words, not comfort. Through trembling lips, Rosa confessed. She was my real mother. Years ago, when she worked for the family, she fell pregnant. Desperate for a child and unable to conceive, the woman I called Mom made a deal, claim me as her own, raise me under her name, and in return Rosa would never lose me completely. But the price of staying close to her daughter was servitude. She remained the maid so she could at least watch me grow up, even if it killed her to play the part of someone lesser. Her tears soaked my hands as she begged for forgiveness, but my mind was spiraling. Everything lined up now, the confusion, the stares, the kids at school mocking me, my so-called mother's disdain. I had spent my entire life being treated like a possession that didn't quite measure up, all while the one person who truly loved me had to pretend to be beneath me. It felt like my chest split open, half of me shattered by lies, the other half relieved that I finally had an answer to the question that haunted me. Why did I never belong? As painful as it was, at least I finally knew who I really was. I wasn't the cold woman's daughter at all. I was Rosa's. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind replayed Rosa's trembling confession over and over until the words dug into my skin like thorns. By the time morning came, I felt hollow but burning, like my body had been drained of everything except rage. I marched straight to the sitting room, where my so-called mother lounged elegantly with a cup of tea and a newspaper, as if nothing in the world could ever shake her. I clutched the evidence in my hand, the photos, the records, and dropped them onto the coffee table in front of her. Her eyes flicked down at the papers, then slowly up at me. For a split second I thought I saw worry, maybe guilt, but it vanished in an instant, replaced with a cold, sharp glare. "So," she said, her voice but laced with venom. "You've been snooping where you don't belong." My voice trembled, but my anger carried it forward. "Don't belong? This is my life, my birth. You stole me." She set her teacup down with surgical precision, her lips curling into what almost looked like a smirk. "Stole you? Don't be ridiculous. this. I saved you. Do you think Rosa could have given you this? She gestured around the lavish room, the gilded furniture, the chandelier, the polished silver. Do you think she could have given you an education, status, a future? You should be thanking me, not accusing me. The words sliced me open. I wanted her to deny it, to sob and say it had been some terrible mistake. Instead, she doubled down, turning my life into a transaction. She didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a prize she had acquired, polished, and displayed for the world. I screamed back, my voice cracking. You had no right. Rosa is my mother. She sacrificed everything just to be near me, while you treated her like trash. You paraded me around like some trophy while forcing her to serve us. Do you have any idea how cruel that is? Her face hardened further, her hands curling into fists. Don't romanticize her. She was weak, poor, desperate. She would have ruined you. Everything you are, your manners, your confidence, comes from me. You belong to me. That word, belong, snapped something inside me. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach heave, as if her voice was poisoning me. I never belonged to you, I spat. You don't know what it's like to love me. You only know how to control me. Her mask of calm cracked, and suddenly she was screaming too. Don't you dare turn on me after everything I've given you. You're ungrateful, a spoiled brat. Without me, you'd be nothing. Tears blurred my vision as I screamed back. Without you, I might have been happy. The house echoed with our voices, every word more brutal than the last. She stood there, unfee, lynching, puffed up with her own sense of righteousness, while I stood trembling, torn between shock and fury. I searched her face for any sign of remorse, any trace of maternal love, and saw nothing but pride and bitterness. She didn't regret what she'd done. She didn't even question it. And in that moment, I realized the choice was mine. I could keep letting her dictate my worth, pretending that privilege equaled love, or I could turn away from her lies and finally stand behind the woman who loved me beyond everything, even if it meant living with less. My identity was broken wide open, but the betrayal seared truth into me. My loyalty no longer belonged in that house. The days after the confrontation felt like living in someone else's nightmare. The moment the truth was out, the atmosphere in our mansion shifted in ways I couldn't have imagined. My mother stalked around the house with her chin tilted high, pretending nothing had happened, while slipping venomous glares at both me and Rosa any chance she got. My father, however, didn't yell or argue or even demand explanations like I expected. Instead, he retreated into his silence. He spent longer hours shut away in his office, barely glancing at me at dinner, like my existence was an inconvenience that embarrassed him more than anything else. I caught him more than once folding his newspaper higher to avoid my eyes, as if ignoring me could erase the scandal from his life. But the house didn't stay quiet for long. Word traveled fast, faster than I thought possible. I don't even know who leaked it. Maybe another servant, maybe one of my mother's so-called friends. But soon, whispers started circling outside the walls of our home. People who had sat at our dining table, sipping our wine and praising our perfect family, were suddenly dissecting us behind closed doors. At school, the situation turned into a fidi, nung frenzy. The bullying, which had already been cruel before, sharpened into something unbearable. Maid's kid, they sneered as I walked past in the hallways. Playing princess all these years. Someone left a fake crown made of cleaning gloves on my desk. Laughter rippled through the room when I found it. A boy shouted across the cafeteria, "Hey, did Rosa polish your homework too?" I wanted to disappear under the table. Their words dug under my skin, each insult reopening the wound of my newfound truth. What made it worse was how the adults reacted. Teachers avoided me, like siding with me would expose them to ridicule too. Neighbors gave me pitying looks sometimes, but most avoided eye contact altogether. Our family name carried weight, but now it carried shame, and I was the reason. Or at least that's how my so-called mother spun the story. She wasted no time twisting the narrative. She started telling anyone who would listen that Rosa had poisoned me against her, filling my head with lies because Rosa was jealous of the life she could never provide. She called Rosa manipulative, ungrateful, desperate. For the first time, I saw Rosa shrink under humiliation. The way some of the servants, who once respected her quiet strength, now stole glances and whispered about her made my blood boil. Rosa carried the blame my mother hurled at her as if it were chains she had no choice but to wear. Everywhere I turned in that house, I felt cornered. My bedroom, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage decorated with silk sheets and chandeliers. I caught myself staring out my window at night, imagining what freedom might feel like without walls made of lies. And yet, despite the suffocating shame, despite the laughter and whispers that stalked me even in sleep, something inside me began to shift. The ache of betrayal and the sting of humiliation didn't crush me the way my mother clearly hoped it would. Instead, it started to harden into something different. At first, it flickered weakly, tiny sparks of defiance when I held Rosa's hand at the dinner table, even though my mother's eyes burned holes through us. Small acts of resistance when I refused to sit quietly at school while classmates taunted me. Quietly, I began to realize that the prison around me only held power because I let it. The truth was painful, yes, but it was mine. And unlike my mother, who built her power on lies, I could build mine on honesty, even if it hurt. The world wanted me to feel ashamed that I was the maid's daughter, but every day that the insult was thrown my way, it stung less and fueled me more. Rosa didn't poison me. She loved me enough to give me her truth, and maybe that was more powerful than any mansion or reputation could ever be. The pressure to stay silent weighed heavy on my shoulders, but in the silence, I felt something new settling inside me. Determination. I don't know what exact moment finally broke me, but I remember the feeling, like I'd been holding my breath for years and suddenly I couldn't anymore. After weeks of screaming matches with my mother, the cruel silences from my father, and the pitiful stares at school, I packed my things in the dead of night. Just a suitcase, a few clothes, and the papers that proved who I really was. My hands shook as I zipped it shut, but for the first time, I felt a sense of control. That night, I walked away from the mansion. I walked away from the chandeliers, the marble, the suffocating lies, and I didn't look back. Rosa was hesitant when I showed up at her small apartment door. She looked stunned, her hair still tied back from a late shift, a dish towel draped over her shoulder. "Mija, you can't leave like this," she whispered, her voice caught between joy and terror. But when she saw the determination in my eyes, she stepped aside, letting me carry my suitcase inside. That moment, standing inside her cramped living room with its peeling wallpaper and secondhand furniture, I felt more at home than I had in the mansion for years. The adjustment hit me like a tidal wave. Gone were the silken sheets and room-sized closets. Instead, I slept on a creaky old bed in Rosa's spare room, its blanket thin but clean, smelling faintly of lavender detergent. Breakfast wasn't croissants with fresh fruit. It was eggs and rice, sometimes just toast. I had to relearn little things I'd taken for granted, turning off lights immediately to save on electricity, buying groceries based on what was cheapest, stretching leftovers for 2 or even 3 meals. There were no drivers to take me to school, no maids to clean up the mess. Suddenly, I was carrying laundry in my own arms, scrubbing dishes, and helping Rosa budget down to the last dollar. And people noticed. At school, classmates smirked. When they heard I was living with the maid now, some even seemed delighted to watch me fall from grace, like my pain was entertainment. Our neighbors whispered too, shaking their heads as if I'd lost some great prize. "Why choose that life when she had everything?" I overheard one woman mutter in the stairwell of the apartment building. Her words stabbed, but strangely, they also fueled me. For the first time, people weren't envying me. They were pitying me. And I discovered I could survive that. Because in that so-called downgrade, there was something I had never tasted before. Love without conditions. Rosa fussed over me in ways my mother never had. She rubbed my temples when I came home from school with headaches. She left little notes in my lunchbox reminding me how proud she was. She listened, really listened, when I cried about feeling lost. Every tear I shed she caught, as if she'd been waiting years for the permission to be the mother she always wanted to be. Her tenderness didn't erase the scars, but slowly, it began to stitch them into strength. I started to see myself differently. Without the layers of wealth and privilege, I realized I had skills I'd never valued before. I could cook without burning rice. I could navigate the city bus system by myself. I could handle people's judgment without collapsing under it. Resilience was a muscle, and I was finally flexing it. Even at school, though the bullying didn't suddenly stop, I began holding my head higher. "Yeah, I am Rosa's daughter," I told one sneering classmate when he mocked me. Shockingly, he didn't know how to respond. For once, I wasn't defending myself. I was claiming myself. The small apartment became a place of rebuilding. Rosa and I laughed over cheap meals I burned the first few tries. We repaired secondhand clothes together and sang along to songs from her old radio while scrubbing the floors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. In that modest space where every corner carried her love, I finally felt like I belonged. Rosa no longer hovered on the sidelines of my life. She was in the center, where she'd always deserved to be. I thought I'd lost everything. Luxury, status, reputation. But what I really lost were chains disguised as privilege. And what I found was the truth of who I am. With every day in that apartment, with every hug and every shared struggle, I grew stronger. I wasn't ashamed anymore of being the maid's daughter. I was proud. And for the first time in my life, I could say it and mean it. At first, living with Rosa felt like survival. Each day was about keeping our lights on, stretching money for groceries, and ignoring the whispers that followed me everywhere. But after a few months, something inside me shifted. The anger that had been eating me alive no longer sat like a stone in my chest. Slowly, it started turning into fuel. I couldn't change where I came from, but I could decide where I was was going, and I wasn't going to let their cruelty or my so-called mother's lies be the end of my story. I started with my studies. School used to feel like a stage where everyone judged me, but now I treated it like my battlefield. Every insult burned into motivation. Every smirk from a bully became another reason to prove them wrong. I stayed up late with textbooks spread across Rosa's tiny kitchen table, drinking instant coffee and highlighting until my eyes stung. Rosa watched proudly, slipping me snacks and reminding me to rest, but I refused to stop until I saw grades that reflected the fire inside me. Slowly, my effort paid off. I went from an average student too distracted by drama to someone actually topping exams. But it wasn't just about grades. I began to use my voice too. The same kids who once mocked me for being the maid's daughter suddenly found themselves facing me head-on when I volunteered to speak at assemblies. I joined clubs I used to avoid, afraid of standing out. One day during a school debate, I looked right into the sneering face of a boy who used to call me Princess of Poverty, and I dismantled his argument so thoroughly that the entire room erupted in applause. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking under the spotlight. I was owning it. Word spread. Even people who had laughed at me before started to change their tone. Some old friends tried crawling back, pretending they hadn't abandoned me when the truth came out. I didn't lash out at them, but I didn't need them either. The girl who had begged for acceptance was gone. I no longer survived on other people's approval. I was building strength from the ashes of humiliation. Meanwhile, my mother kept trying to reel me back in. She called, left messages, sent cars to pick me up. Sometimes she'd show up at school, her manicured nails gripping my arm as she whispered in that sharp tone only I could hear. Enough of this nonsense. Come home. You're embarrassing us. What has Rosa given you? A leaky apartment? A collection of hand-me-down clothes? You were meant for better. And then she'd dangle it all. The mansion, the comfort, the privilege, as if they were lures I couldn't resist. But the funny thing was, the more she waved her gold in my face, the cheaper it looked. Because back in the apartment with Rosa, love didn't have to be bought. Rosa cooked humble meals and shared them with laughter. Rosa told me bedtime stories in Spanish she thought I'd long forgotten. Rosa asked me how I felt, not how I looked. Every moment with her reminded me that I had traded emptiness for fullness, even if the walls around us weren't gilded. Still, the tension ate at me sometimes. I'd walk past stores showcasing clothes I used to own, or see my old friends pulling up in brand new cars, and envy would prick at me. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I had been and foolish to give it all up. But then Rosa's snores drifted softly from the next room, and peace would flood back in. She didn't have to say a word. Her presence alone reminded me I had chosen right. My so-called mother tried to twist her power one last time. She cornered me outside school, offering me keys to a car for my birthday, saying, "This is who you're supposed to be. Don't throw it all away." For a second, I almost faltered. The shiny silver keys sparkled in the sunlight like temptation itself. But then I pictured Rosa's tired hands, rough from years of scrubbing floors, and the way her arms had comforted me when no one else would. My decision became clear. I dropped the keys back into her palm and walked away without looking back. Pain had once been my cage, keeping me locked in shame and confusion. Now it was my weapon, a reminder of what I'd survived and what I was capable of. I wasn't the broken girl in the golden house anymore. I was Rosa's daughter, and I was learning to make my own place in the world. Nothing she could offer, no amount of money or sparkling lies could ever buy that self-respect. And finally, I felt powerful. Years passed before I saw her again. By then, my life was no longer defined by the marble halls of that mansion or the cruel whispers that had once haunted me. I had built myself from the ground up, with Rosa by my side every step of the way. But fate has a cruel way of circling back. One day, I received a message. She wanted to see me. The woman who once stole me, controlled me, and dismissed my pain was suddenly reaching out. Against my better judgment, I went. Not for her, but for myself, for closure. When I walked into the once grand house, I barely recognized it. The chandeliers were still there, but dulled, dusty. The flowers in the entryway were wilted. It felt like the entire place had aged along with her. She sat in the parlor, a shadow of the woman I remembered, still regal in posture, but thinner, her face lined, her eyes heavy-whipped. Something that looked dangerously close to regret. "You came," she said softly, as if she were surprised I hadn't erased her entirely. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I stood tall, my chest steady. "You asked for me. What do you want?" Her lips trembled before she forced her usual sharpness back into her tone. "I thought maybe we could patch things. Start again. I'm old now, alone, and you're still my daughter." The word struck me like a sour note, but this time it didn't wound me. It almost made me want to laugh. "No," I said firmly. "I was never your daughter. You made sure of that when you traded love for control. I belong to Rosa. I belong to Rosa." Her eyes flashed with desperation. "After everything I gave you," I cut her off with the calm I had earned through years of struggle. "You didn't give me anything worth keeping. You had money, yes, but Rosa gave me love, courage, strength. strength. Everything I am today came from her, not you. For the first time, I saw her falter. The queenly mask cracked, and behind it was just an aging, bitter woman who realized she no longer held power over me. The silence stretched, and in it I understood something. It wasn't me who needed her anymore. It was her who needed me. I let that truth settle between us, then turned for the door. My footsteps echoed on the marble, but they no longer felt heavy. I wasn't walking away from wealth. I was walking away from chains. Before stepping out, I looked over my shoulder one last time. Rosa raised me right, and nothing you did could change that. And with that, I left. Not broken, not bitter, but free. Looking back now, it feels like I've lived two completely different lives. In one, I was the girl in silk dresses roaming a mansion, admired by outsiders but hollow on the inside. In the other, I was the girl eating rice and eggs in a cramped kitchen with Rosa, laughing uneaswanted. Our cheeks hurt. If you asked me years ago which life I'd choose, I would have clung to the marble floors and chandeliers. But today, the answer is so clear it almost makes me ache. Give me the laughter, the love, the truth, every single time. I used to think identity was something handed down, stamped on me by wealth and family status. I thought the right clothes, the right name, the right house meant I belong. But what I've learned is that belonging has nothing to do with material things. Belonging is about who holds you when you fall, who fights for you when you're silent, who still sees you when the world looks away. Rosa did all of that for me. She gave me what no mansion could, the freedom to be myself without shame. Yes, I am the maid's daughter, and for a long time those words felt like a curse, an accusation meant to belittle me. But now, they're my crown. Being Rosa's daughter makes me proud because it means I was raised by a woman who worked her fingers raw just to be close to me, who never stopped loving me even when she was forced to hide it. If love like that is what it means to be the maid's daughter, then I'll hold the title with honor. The girl I was before, the naive child trapped in golden walls, is gone. In her place stands someone stronger, built from fire and truth. My past may have been stolen, but my future is mine. And if you ask me who I really am, I'll tell you clearly, without fear and with every ounce of pride in my heart, I am Rosa's daughter. Always.